Welcome to the Right People, Right Places podcast. I'm your host, Raul Mendoza, and I have the pleasure of having a conversation about leadership with the one and only Maeve McGuire. We've known each other for a while and have had experiences at different companies together, and I think it was just probably about a month ago, right? We had a conversation, coffee shop here in Menominee.
Yep, our coffee talk.
Yes.
Yes.
And, you know, that's how it is on this podcast. I want it to be very much a conversation about different topics in business, recruiting, entrepreneurship, and leadership. And that actually is what we talked about. We were just talking about the ROI on leadership. And anyway, Maeve, it's great to have you on.
Thank you, Raul. Happy to be here.
Excellent. And Maeve is currently the HR leader here at MTE Corp. So doing great things, just came on board, was it just a couple months ago? Or
July.
Okay,
Yep.
More than a couple months ago.
Few. I'd say a few.
So she's been settling in, doing some great things here. And yeah, maybe if you want to just share a little bit about yourself and, you know, your work here at MTE and your background, and
Sure.
so
Absolutely.
that our audience can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Absolutely. I joined MTE in July 2024. I've enjoyed it tremendously because the company has such a focus on leadership, and it's really the first time in my career where I've been able to spend quality one-on-one time consistently with all of the leaders in MTE. And the purpose of that is because they value their people and they understand that in order for your people to be engaged and to do their best work and to stay, you have to have good leaders, because that old saying of people don't leave, a company, they leave their boss. So it's really important to have that here. So I stay close to all the leaders, make sure they're developing their people, they have development plans, make sure that the managers themselves have a development plan in place, and also discuss succession planning. So we're doing that right now.
Excellent.
As we come up on performance management and merit increases. We have a very robust succession planning where we look at our high potentials, what our critical roles are, and maybe where some of the blockers are, right? If there are behaviors or skill sets that need to be improved in order for that person to get to the next level. So really taking a lot of time and a lot of effort into ensuring that the people are taken care of. So I love it.
That's
this is
fantastic.
It's a dream for me to get to know everybody and really make an impact on the organization, and that a company actually, walks the walk.
Yes.
Right? They say, people are our most important aspect, but they also show it through their actions.
Yes.
And the time, the money, the effort that is put into people really shows, because we were voted, best workplace to work last year.
Fantastic.
We're hoping for another nomination this year. And we do 2 or 3 engagement surveys every year to stay close to what we're doing well and what we need to do better, and then putting those action plans into, what do we need to do better.
Totally.
And so showing our employees, hey, you're speaking up, you're sharing your thoughts and your feedback with us, and we take it seriously. So if you're telling us this is broken, we're telling you we're going to come and fix it.
Totally.
Within reason, of course.
I love it. I love it. That you just touched on so many. Leadership development is multi-pronged, and whether it's early talent up through executive level, there's different strategies. You can't employ the same that you would at talent that are just coming in through the door than talent and leaders and executives that have been with an organization have much more responsibility. There's just different levels of development and tools at different stages of that journey. And I think, you touched on that, and I'd love to kind of dive in to that a little bit more. But what I wanted to ask is, when it comes to leadership development and training, when do you think, in your experience, having worked with organizations of different sizes, when is the right time? And when is the most potent time to provide that type of training and development?
Yeah, I mean, I've been at different companies, and I think leadership development is all the time ongoing. However, I've been with companies where there are peaks with very aggressive growth objectives. So it's really about having a vision into the future, right? And some of it is math, right? If we're going to grow by 25%,
right?
What does that mean from a leadership perspective?
Right.
Are we preparing our emerging leaders, right, that are out of college and maybe on site for 5 years? Are we preparing them for their next position of leadership? Are we grooming them and getting them ready? Because so often companies promote people. They could be very technically strong. So they're like, hey, this engineer is fantastic. Yeah, he or she is super technical.
Yes.
They get work done, but that doesn't equate to leadership. And then they put them in a leadership role, and then the person may or may not be successful. But if they're not, it's not always a fault of their own.
Right.
Because they weren't trained, they weren't taught. And we don't have those classes in high school, college.
I know.
So no one really teaches us, right, how to be a good leader. So preparing those people, and then also, looking at critical roles, because I've been in an organization, right, where, someone is in a critical role and they resign and the company is all up in arms, right?
Right.
It's like, oh my God, we gotta
what are we gonna do? What are we gonna
get
do?
a counter offer to them, save them. It's like, had you have been proactive,
Yep.
and had a good open communication and very candid, honest conversations with your team members, this could have been avoided.
Absolutely.
So we go from proactive to reactive, and then it takes us 3 to 4 months to replace that person. All that knowledge is gone. Where had we have just been proactive in the first place?
Yes.
Make sure they're getting their development, make sure, they have a good relationship with their manager, make sure they're, jiving with the culture,
Yes.
and because it shouldn't be a surprise if
Right.
somebody leaves. Just like it shouldn't be a surprise if you have to fire someone, it shouldn't be a surprise if somebody resigns.
Absolutely. That's the transparency and accountability of good leadership. Having a leadership culture is what you're describing there. And I think, well, one, when it comes to leadership, again, it's one of those things that we talk so much about, leadership. And typically we think of it in terms of positional and responsibility. But building a leadership culture is ongoing. It's early talent up through executive. Obviously there's different levels. And I think in what you're saying, there's an intentionality that you need and an attention that needs to be brought. So when you have that executive that is kind of the centerpiece or the heartbeat of a culture in a company, when they leave, it's not like the thing just collapses on itself. Right. If you have a leadership culture, you probably have someone that can rise to it. And I think there's a statement that I come back to a lot, everything rises and falls on leadership.
It does. You're right.
So I guess with what you were saying is, I love what you're talking about there with leadership. I think, and that's why I think it's important. One, there's an ROI to good leadership, because you're going to get that return on investment not only in the bottom line, but in a situation like you just mentioned, right, where you have someone that leaves the organization. Well, in a leadership culture, you're going to have someone that fills in the gap, and beyond that, you're going to know when that's happening, because in a leadership culture, there's transparency, accountability, communication. It's ongoing. It's not just annual reviews. It's ongoing, regular, weekly, monthly, quarterly conversations. So I wanted to talk about some of the frameworks, like what you've seen work. And these aren't, I think a lot of the times people are looking for that. I think you've already mentioned it, the silver bullet is communication. It's just talking about these things, talking about the real stuff, right?
Right.
Whether it's early on or whether it's you're an executive at the C-suite, let's talk about the real stuff. Let's put aside the shenanigans and let's
Right.
talk about what's really happening, and that's kind of, you're sharing that in what you're saying, but I kind of wanted to, with your wealth of experience, Maeve, wanted to understand maybe at the, at early talent level, what are some frameworks, tools, things that you've built, or that you've implemented that you've seen a return on investment with leaders? And then also, what are things, since, obviously that changes for the executive suite or director management level, what are some frameworks and tools, maybe one for each?
Yeah, for sure. I was, my past life, I was with an organization that had very aggressive growth goals. So, taking a step back and looking at the big picture, right? And I think that's where HR can be a strong strategic business partner. I've always told people, whatever job they're in, like knowing what people need and knowing how to solve their problems before they do makes you like super person.
Yes.
Right? Because, they haven't even asked for it.
That's strategic human resources. That's not maintenance
Exactly.
human resources. I love that.
Being super proactive, right? And being business minded, like how is this growth going to affect the business and what does that mean for its people? Because we're typically focused on, our products or our services and our clients, and that's all good. We should be, but we tend to lose sight of the people.
Right.
Right, because we're so focused on the business. So that's where HR, I think, can come in. And when I was in this company, I would sit at the table with the executives and I'd hear them talking and, I wouldn't even have to ask, right? It's like, well, of course we're gonna need something in place, right?
Yep.
So, go back and put my thinking cap on and it's like, build a program, right? Build a cool program for our, emerging leaders. At this company, it was 5 years out of college.
Okay.
And then make it special, right? So that people want to be in it, right? If a company is going to invest, and we were going to invest, this was a 2-year program for our cohorts. So we had 40 cohorts, emerging leaders in the organization, and they didn't just get to go just because they were emerging talent. They had to be nominated.
Okay.
So it was special. It was like, hey, Raul.
This is recognition, like from those around them.
That they see potential
yes.
in this person, right? So right there, it's like, this is special. Not everybody gets to go, right? Not every single emerging leader in the company got to go to this program. So they were nominated, and then they had to want to be there, right? Because we didn't want people sitting in our trainings who were not engaged, taking this seriously, taking it back to, their desk and implementing what they're learning. So this is a big deal, right, for the organization and for the people, right? So create this training with a third party trainer because they have the expertise.
Sure. The focus and
involve all of the stakeholders, right? So what are we trying to accomplish here? What gaps do we see that need to be filled? What competencies do these young professionals need to have to go into a leadership role? And then let's measure it. Let's measure its success. Let's measure attrition during the program, and then let's measure, promotability, right? So
those are some of the early measures. I guess I'm curious with that as well. Well, a couple things. One, I love how that selection process takes place. I think as soon as you said that, it was just the statement that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And if you have emerging leaders that are exercising any level of influence and impact, and it's being recognized by their peers, that's a sign of hunger and leadership, So
Totally.
I love that that's the way you identified those individuals versus looking purely at talent needs, talent gaps. That's a real thing, right? And So yeah, anyway, did you want to comment on that? It seemed like you were.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
You know, being tapped on the shoulder,
Yes.
you know, not just by your boss, but your peers and then the executives also approving.
Yes.
You know, that is a special feeling, right? And
Yes.
who would want to leave a company that is recognizing you for the great work that you're doing and sees the potential in you,
Right.
and then is going to invest in you, right?
I love it.
I mean, this is what, when we do exit interviews with people, this is what we hear, right? There was no investment, there was no growth, there was
Yep.
no development, right? They weren't feeling loved. They
Right.
weren't feeling like they were being recognized for what they brought to the table. And that's when people tend to leave.
Yes.
Go find it somewhere else.
Totally.
So give it to them, you know, where they are, then they're happy and they're learning. And this was a cool program too, because, you know, we all go to training programs, we learn things, and 9 times out of 10 we take it back to our office, and what do we do with it?
It just sits
It
on the
kind of
shelf,
gets
right?
buried,
Yep.
you know, and we get, you know, back into our day-to-day work. So we recognize that to say, no, we're just not going to throw out some cookie cutter training program. We are going to customize this, and we're going to bring in experts, right? So that not only is it very intentional on what our cohorts were learning, we also involve the executive team.
Wow. Okay.
So we would do these like communities of practice, right? So our cohorts would go through a training, and then 2 weeks later they would join a community of practice where, you know, we would send out a TED Talk based on what they learned previously, let them get together as team members to discuss, and then bring it back to their managers and have those discussions and what they were going to do with that learning to implement it into their
excellent.
projects or their work. Or their development, and holding people accountable, holding managers accountable, because of course there were managers who would not, they just wouldn't, right? For
Right.
whatever reason, engage and discuss. So we held them accountable, right? This is your direct report. This is what we need you to do, and if you don't, you're going to be held accountable.
Yeah.
But everybody was on board. And then ultimately the project ended with kind of a capstone project, right? So it was, okay, we're going to take everything that you learned and what project do we want to do? So we ended up partnering with some high schools to bring students in for an entire day.
Okay.
And we had different groups. We had our finance, you know, our marketing, our IT. They were kind of stations, and the students could rotate through the stations, and they would go into, you know, what is a day in the life of a finance person?
Okay.
What's a day in the life of an HR person? So they get that real life experience.
Right. That kind of vantage point into that
Do
role.
I want to go into this? I can ask questions. I can see what the workplace looks like.
Yes.
And then, you know, treated them to lunch, and it was, you know, cameras were there, TV stations were there, because it was local and bringing in our community. So it was also a way to attract talent,
Totally. That's
right?
so cool.
You get hundreds of students, and then they always remember, hey, I was at this company, and
Right,
you know,
they have that in their mind. That's etched in their mind. So that's, you know, you're getting your branding, your name, and
totally
there's your early talent pipeline.
give it back to the community.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Yep.
and then they learn, and then they apply what
Yes.
they learned, you know, and then they graduate, and then we tracked, you know, attrition, right? So did we lose anyone in the program over 2 years? There are multiple people promoted during the 2-year program, and we just followed those people for the rest of the career. One of them, I think, is now on the exec, you know, 10, maybe 12 years later after she went through this program, she's now on the executive team.
Wow.
Because they invested in, you know, it's just, so it works, right?
That's
And you
so
see it
cool.
work. And it can be done. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, money, but it can be done.
Oh my goodness, I love it. There's just so much there. There's so much there. I think application. That's just it. Application. You know, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, this idea of leadership. I think it can get stuck in the ethereal and you know, in just in theory, when we're just talking about concepts, principles. And I mean, you go to the library, you go to a bookstore, you go on Amazon. I guess you don't go to the bookstore anymore, but if you go online,
I don't know.
there's loads of books on leadership and ideas. And
Totally.
And it's like, you know, at the end of the day, I think, and unfortunately, I think that's why leadership can feel like this kind of flaky, floaty idea pie in the sky type of thing where companies can not see the importance of it, you know, because there isn't an application, there isn't an intentionality. Like you said, you have to have all parties, you have to have engaged, hungry people at the early levels of their career that want that and are taking steps towards that direction. And then you do need leaders that can identify that, who are seasoned, who are experienced, that you know, have seen some things. And unfortunately, I think what happens, you know, you said a key thing. It's about being proactive with these measures. It's about being proactive with early talent, so that when you get to those higher levels, you're not learning leadership in the crucible of an executive position and by error, right? You know, I love with this program, like you had someone that went through this young lady who is now a part of this executive team. I mean, I'm just thinking, gosh, all the things that she's been trained, you know, she's now got awareness, she's got tools, she's got frameworks, she's got the experience that was poured into from those that were involved in the program. So the things that she's going to be able to dodge in terms, and even anticipate from a leadership perspective at that level now is amazing. She won't you know, we learn wisdom through our mistakes, and,
right?
Or we learn it because we ask questions and we have people that we can draw on, you know.
Yes.
So anyway, well, you know, I'm just getting excited as I'm hearing you talk about. I'm like, and these aren't, again, it's not rocket science. It's just having a program and being intentional, getting buy-in.
Exactly, and doing it right, right? Because you don't want to invest all this time and money and then not have it work or not measure it to see if it worked, right? And then you measure it and you can also see how you improve for your next cohort session, and make those changes throughout the program. And you get everybody involved, right? So a lot of our communities of practice were led by an executive.
So good.
So that they're engaged with the young cohorts, right? They're not just looking at it from up above. They're actually there on the ground, you know, coming to our training sessions, our all-day training sessions, leading the discussions, and helping to teach people, you know, leadership is very broad, and leadership can look different from one company to the next. Right. So, you know, leadership skills at one company may not translate to a new one. So it's also about training people. What does that mean here?
Right.
What does agility or, you know, what does that mean here? Because it could be very different. You know, they may have learned ways of doing things at previous positions, which is great. That can bring in an outside perspective. But you also have to know, what's the first thing you do on your first day of work? You try and figure out, how do you communicate here? What's the culture like? How do I fit in? How do I behave? Or how do we do things here?
Right.
Because I've done these things, but not here.
Yes.
And that helps people understand where the priorities are within that organization.
I love it. Context. I mean, you got to have context. And I think, you know, what works in one place isn't going to work somewhere else. And, you know, those principles are, you know, the principles of leadership will carry, you know, from organization to organization, right? But how you apply them. And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, just about with this program and this cohort and this intentional focus for 2 years, like you're building the muscle of application with leadership. So it's like, now you know how to do it in this environment. How do you take those principles and go somewhere else? And even know how to ask questions, even know how to read the room and the culture, because those principles are true for that company. Agility here means this, agility there means this, but how do you know, that's part of being a leader, being able to read, you know, people and situations and organizations. So I think, unfortunately, I think so many folks just don't get the opportunity to be in that kind of environment to learn
Right.
those skills. So
Right.
I think it's just so, it's not rocket science, right? But
Yeah.
this is the return on investment that we get when we have buy-in from executive leaders, mid-level managers.
Right.
You know, when you have different levels of leaders pouring into a group.
Absolutely. And then you can take those emerging leaders,
Mm-hmm.
we would take them and they would be at our job fairs. So that, a young professional at a job fair can come up to your job fair booth and talk to somebody around their age, and they can tell their story. Like, why did you join? What do you love? And what a great recruitment tool to be able
Yes.
to, because you're going to attract those same like-minded people. Like, some people might be like, oh, I would never want to go through a 2-year program.
Yep.
Or I don't want to be a leader, and that's all good. But we wanted to attract, the same people. So then those people become your ambassadors.
Yes.
Social media, out in public, right, with high schools, right? Because the kids want to talk to somebody relatively close, 10 years within their age, right? So the young woman I spoke about, her ability to tell a story, like on how she started and how the company invested and how she worked hard to get where she is, that's inspiring.
Yes.
Right? And people want to join your organization. So that return on investment shows up in multiple places, right? It's not just like one place.
Yep.
It's like in recruitment, in attraction, in retention. It's a giant circle.
Yes.
Right? It's not just like, oh, we're recruiting the best, we're retaining the best. We're all working together for the same goal.
Yes.
Because we cannot grow and be successful without the best people.
So
And had that have not been done, we would be fine and people would survive. But what a terrible experience, right? Being a
I
young
know.
professional and, hey,
Figure
go
it
lead
out.
10 people, and you're like, okay, what do I do? What do I say? Oh, I can't say that. I
Yeah.
can't do. It's not fair to people. You're not setting them up to succeed all the
Right.
time. Or
Totally.
you're giving it to them after the fact, right? After they're already down in the weeds, you're like, oh, now you need to go to training. Well, no.
Totally. I think, man, so much there, what you're saying. I think, wow. Yeah, I have a recruiting company, Rapido Talent. So I think, to me, one of the things that I have conversation with talent leaders all the time are, I'm filling roles that are leadership roles. And they're critical. They're absolutely critical, because these are the people, great leaders attract other great leaders, and that's why there has to be a focus on growing them and also continuing to provide them tools all along the way, and I think I'm a huge, being in recruiting for over 20 years now, to me it's like, it's not, recruiting is an ongoing activity.
Yeah.
And in fact, a leadership culture creates an attraction of leaders. It just attracts leaders. It does the job for you if you do it right. If you have that long-term vision to build that. And at the end of the day, that's what you want, because you're going to get the best hires from it. You're not, if you're just focusing on recruiting and you're not thinking about the full circle, then you're not actually protecting your future investment.
Absolutely.
It has to start here. It has to start top down involvement, and that's it makes services like ours worthless if there isn't that kind of investment. I'd rather, for instance, I have a company up in North Wisconsin that we work with, a food and bev company, and we're working on a engineer. This was a project. It was a principal project management role that they were looking for, and it'd been open for months, and they gave it to us, and I said, "Yeah, we can get you some talent. However, is there anyone in-house that we can consider? Is there anyone?" And we worked on it. We brought great talent to the table, and in the end, we continue. I'm like, is there anyone else that we could bring up? We don't even have to bring them up. We don't even have to have them at that level. Maybe we bring them at their level and we set a career path. And this company actually, they ended up hiring someone that was 2 levels below. And I think that's a testament to their outlook on, because it's like that person, if they can build a career for the next 5-10 years, growing into that principal level, they're going to attract other talent that are going to want to come and work here. And not only that, he's going to be able to pass down that knowledge and that experience. So anyway, I think that what you're saying there, you can't, there's just so much there. It's a full circle moment, I think, right now in what you're sharing.
It is. It really is.
We have to, it's all of these things together. Doesn't mean that we don't recruit and we just focus all of our time and efforts on recruiting. It's all of it, right?
It is. It's a giant circle, and it shouldn't just be piecemeal together, right? Like, this is how we recruit, this is how we develop, this is how we retain, right? It should all be, thought in top of mind as we're looking to bring people into the organization. And I think, another thing that I was going to ask you about is, we have so many generations in the workforce now, right? You've got your boomers, your Gen X, your millennials, Gen Zs, and they're all so different. And they want different things, right? So recruiting, leadership, programs, all of that have to constantly evolve because, you're not just working with one generation of people, you're working with so many. So staying on top of things and knowing what the generations value and keeping that top of mind instead of regurgitating the same programs over and over again, and not customizing or really focusing maybe on like a needs analysis, right? Like, what skills is the company going to need in the next 5 years, 10 years, right? When you work in a company that it is evolving, let's use AI as an example, right? AI is blowing up. Well, there's skills that a company needs that they probably may not have in an organization because of AI and how new it is, right? So how do you bring that in and hire for those skills or train who you have? So it's always staying. So my question for you is, I'm sure you talk to all sorts of candidates in different generations. Do you see that as what people are looking for in each generation? And do you bring that back to your clients so that they know, right? Recruiters are great because they know what's going on out in the world. They know what people are saying. Right? Like during COVID, right? Recruiting was all focused on hybrid work, remote work, right? And that was the first time we ever recruited where that was like the first question, right? Do I have to be in the office?
Do I have to be in the office, right?
Because if I do, I don't want the job.
Right.
So, wow, okay, that just changed. How do we adjust to that?
Totally. I love that question. And there's a couple different ways that I'm tempted to go with this, but I think I'm just going to keep it really simple. I think relationship, even just what this podcast is all about, right people, right places. At the end of the day, recruiting, HR, leadership, it's about relationship. The program that you spearheaded for leadership development, that's an idea that's facilitated through relationship. And I think, we have so much at our fingertips with tech, and AI, and I think one of the drums that I'm beating when it comes to AI is it actually enables us to focus on what is most important, which is building relationships. And that's actually one of the things that and relationship is the context for understanding people. That is the context for understanding people. It's getting to know people. And I think when it comes to the up and coming generation, Gen Z, they want authenticity. They want transparency. You know, it's not any different than it was in the 60s and 70s. If you think about it, like 80s, 90s, authenticity. It, like these threads of needs have carried throughout time. We've just called it different things.
Yep.
You know, and I think for me as a recruiter and partner to companies, and there's so much value in understanding generational differences and of helping facilitate how to engage talent. I mean, even in building Rapido talent and working with different companies, you know, I'm the recruiter rapper. It's like, would I have done that 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Probably not, because it's different, it's unusual. But I know that Gen Z is looking for authentic, for real, there's an element of entertainment, or what they call edutainment. You know, they want to be entertained and educated at the same time. It's not about entertainment, it is about fun. They want to have fun and learn, you know, and who doesn't?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, part of people that have been doing a job for a long time in a role, maybe at the top ranks of a company, they might be bored. You insert a little fun in there, all of a sudden they have a brand new perspective on their job.
Yeah.
So I think so important what you're touching on there with having, and I think, and a lot of the times you can think, well, what about somebody that's in their, you know, at the end of their career, you know, can they engage with the younger generation? And I would say, yeah, just tell them about the real stuff. Tell them about the stuff, tell them about the bumps and bruises of leadership. Tell them about, you know, that's going to engage a younger generation. They're going to be like, whoa, I want to hear more about that. And you know what? Maybe you don't feel like you've got the delivery or the style. You don't feel hip or cool, you know?
Right.
I'm starting to feel that way now, you know, because I'm like, I've got 4 kids and I'm like, geez, like, you know, I'm feeling my age in different ways, you know, and even in being in different circles, I'm like, oh, they don't know what, you know, they don't know what Nokia is. They don't know what a cassette is, you know? You know, it's like, it's different. So, but what I can do, I think the biggest thing that any leader can do, any recruiting partner, you know, whether you're doing what I'm doing as a company, is just be authentic and real. And that means just being transparent and talking about the real stuff of your journey. And that creates relationship, you know?
Yeah.
I think making those deposits it takes courage to do that, you know, and it's uncomfortable because you know, you're sharing things that you don't feel proud of sometimes, or you know,
right.
But in doing that, you're forging relationship. That's when real relationships formed.
Absolutely.
So,
and you've got the trust, right? When
yes.
someone is being authentic and real, it's like, okay, I can trust this person, right? And I think what I love about the Gen Z and even, you know, some of maybe the younger millennials is they know what they want and they know what they don't.
Absolutely.
And they're just fine telling you
spot on
how it is.
Yes.
You know, and I love that because I don't know, they're just very decisive.
Yes.
And that makes it easier when you sit down for a development discussion. It's like, what do you want to do?
Right.
Right? You're 5 years into your role. You have the whole world ahead of you, right? You've got another, 20, 30 years to work in the workforce. What do you want to do? And they tell me, I don't want to do that, right? And I do want to do this. It makes it so much easier to get them on the right career path versus people are like, I don't know, or unrealistic, right? Well, I want to be the CFO in 5 years. Well, okay, that's probably not going to happen, right? So let's switch that, right? Set some realistic expectations. But I love that about them, and they love connecting with people with more experience.
Yes.
Because they realize they can learn from them. Right.
So true.
And you're right. You got to be, it doesn't matter your age, as long as you're being authentic and real, and you care about that conversation and you care about that person. Because I think too, that's what Gen Z wants, right? Going through COVID, we see that in leadership.
Rough years. I mean.
Oh my, like they're coming into the workplace with a totally different perspective than we did. Right?
Yes.
They went through stuff nobody else has ever gone through.
Seriously, in a lifetime.
So
you're spot on. I mean, I love what you're saying there. I think it's a great way to kind of even just wrap up our conversation on leadership here. I think looking at the next generation, and that's the investment, right? That's what we're doing here. I think what it is it's interesting with Gen Z. They're very visionary. Mm-hmm. They've got more tools and money at their disposal than any other generation has in history.
True.
So it's like, I think a lot of them are overwhelmed with the options that are before them, and that's where wisdom and guidance of a leader that's been through some things can bring so much value and so much perspective. I think one of the things that Gen Z can lack, and here I'm saying something now that could be controversial. What are we going to do about it? But I'm going to say it, Gen Z, because I'm hiring a Gen Z recruiter actually next month, and they have vision, they have passion, they have excitement, they have tools, they have money, and that's fantastic, and time, like no other generation has. What they don't have, I think what they need is accountability and grit. And I think that's where we can come in as an older generation and bridge that gap and reveal yourself and put yourself out there and be authentic, talk about the real stuff. But that actually creates a channel to talk about the real stuff of, hey, why didn't that get done? Or, hey, what was your thinking there? Or you know what, you're giving up too easily.
Yeah.
I find so much with this up and coming generation. They give up easily, not because it's necessarily hard, it's because they don't they have so many options. I think that's one of it. And I think part of it too, because it gets hard. And there's so much that technology has taken off their plate that they don't have to endure in the same way we've had to,
right.
So it's like, the
grit.
Grit, it's like, hey, stick at it, for a while. That's what really develops you as a leader. That's where that's where the gold comes, and I think that's what we have an opportunity to do. I think coming full circle with what you're saying, what an excellent framework you've provided. I think that's a great tool for someone to take and say, hey, I can do this at our company, and we can put a different face on it, a different packaging to make it personalized to our company. I think what you shared there is just absolute gold. But I think also within that, just the impartation of, hey, just be yourself, be you, and build relationship. And if you are transparent, honest, and fun, and be quirky, because honestly, the quirks,
right?
They love it. They love it. They totally. It's real. That's why, and. I think what that does is it creates a relationship that you can not only say the things that are exciting, but you can say the things that are hard,
Exactly. And share your mistakes.
Correct.
Right? Be real. This is how I learned in my past because I royally screwed up.
Yeah, right. Right.
And I don't want that for you.
Yes.
Right. And, that's, I think, real. Sharing your downfalls, your mistakes, your screw ups with people is so real.
Yes.
Right. It's like, I'm human. I'm not perfect. You can let your guard down and you can share you made a mistake. You can share
Absolutely.
You're struggling, and I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to hold it against you. If anything, it's just going to build that trust and that relationship.
Yep.
And that's what I love about Gen Z is they're cool with that, right? They're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I learned from that, and they take themselves seriously, but not too serious.
Yes.
And this is, corporate world, but does it have to be that corporate, right?
Right.
Can't we just chill out and, sit in our beanbag chairs and drink a latte and
there you go.
And just talk
totally
like real people like we are here today? Can't we just do that?
Yes.
And, that, to me, that's fun. That's the good stuff, right? I'm learning about you, not just as a person, but also, what you bring to the table and vice versa.
Totally.
So.
And that's just it. I think, relationship. It all comes down to relationship, and good leaders know how to build relationship, and I think in what you provided in that framework, it creates this environment for people to learn how to build relationships that not only attract talent, but also build great cultures, build great companies. I think create health, create data points for building and growing. And I think even what you said about, understanding the business, like HR, understanding the business. I think that's so, I think HR can be so maintenance, and it's needed. And there is elements of that are important, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think these are the things that they seem intangible, but over time you can see the tangible nature, and even the things that you were measuring. I think for those of you who are listening, you got to go back and listen to the items that Maeve just discussed in that framework. I think it's absolute gold in terms of things to measure. Promotability, you had shared, years beyond that program. Where did they go? Did they continue getting promotions? What was the retention rate within that cohort? Why did they leave? Looking at those things and continuing to iterate on that program. It's a living thing, and it's only going to be as living and as active and as impactful as the leaders that are involved and connected. So getting that top-down buy-in, that middle management, that identification of people, that process of, anyway, I'm getting excited. I feel like I'm rehashing like what you so beautifully shared. But as we kind of wrap up our conversation here, I like to do this on episodes, is, if there's one thing that you can leave the audience with anything that we've talked about, whether, or anything else, what would that be that you would want to pass on to HR leaders, talent acquisition leaders, business builders, that would be like something that has helped you and in your journey in solving problems for companies?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's so many answers I have for it. We don't have enough time for it, but I do feel like having that business acumen from an HR perspective has the leaders that I worked for and with have always expressed that's the value that we bring, right? That we're looking at it from a business perspective. How is this going to affect the business? Because at the end of the day, that's why we're here. We're here for the business
check, right?
and to make money,
yeah,
right? But how do we do that with the people that we have, and tying the programs, the processes, and the policies so that they protect the company, but also give room for the company to be innovative and forward thinking, versus this is the way we've always done things, or being so stuck in very general training programs or approaches. Those are fine, cookie cutter is fine. But if you want more, if you want to bring things to the next level, thinking out of the box, thinking of, just don't put something in place and send somebody to a training.
Right.
Like HR has to be ingrained in that, and they have to lead it, and they have to be the role model for it. Right. So you yourself have to be a strong leader, but also hold people accountable. Right. Like, hey, you're not showing up. You're not showing the values of the organization, and you need to, because you can't have a program like that or anywhere if your leadership, everybody is not on the same page, talking the same language, and has the same, intensity. Otherwise it's just meh.
Yes.
And people don't want meh.
Right.
They want cool, they want new, they want different.
Yeah.
And they want to be recognized and valued. We all do.
Yes.
So I think that's,
that's
overall
cool.
Like what's
Where's
helped
the
me
mic?
most.
Mic drop. That's gold. I love that. I think it's so practical, and we're in business. I mean, it comes down to this. We're in business to make money, and you build policies and procedures around business vision and for, the future. And policies and procedures are needed to protect an organization, absolutely, but you need vision.
Right.
You need to understand the business focus. And I think that alone, HR, talent, people, talent acquisition, focusing on understanding the business and really knowing it, getting passionate about it. And maybe if they're not in a product or space that they're excited about, getting there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that you can align policy, procedure, training to that vision instead of doing it the other way around. Unfortunately, that's what happens, right? And
Yeah.
so I don't even want to add more to what you said there, but anyway,
We'll stop there.
I think, oh my gosh. Anyway, no, but please say what you were going to say. I felt like you had something that you wanted to bring.
No, I mean, I think, I think that's a big part of it. I think back to when I was a younger professional, and what drove me nuts was we've always done things this way.
Right.
Because it's like, well, that's great. Maybe it worked 10 years ago, but technology, the world, everything is different now. And to me, that just sounds lazy. Like, I don't want to take the time to change this or improve it or to make it better, put in the hard work. So it's easier just to say we've always done things this way. And that was so frustrating for me as a young professional. I'm like, I'm here to dig in. I'm here. You got grit, right?
Right.
I want to learn. I want to make an impact.
Yes.
I want change, right?
Yep.
And so you have to keep that in mind, right? Like, that's why I asked about the generation. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Right? And
Totally.
then your
Oh my
older leaders, right?
Yeah.
That have been there for a while. When you're younger, it's all about you, right? It's all about you and the work that you're doing and how you're going to advance. But when you get to the level of leadership, it shifts.
Yes.
And now it's all about relationships,
Yes.
getting work done through other people. And so it's completely changed. I'm like, you're no longer an individual. You have to care about your team. It is all about your team.
Yep.
It is not about you anymore.
Yeah.
So flip the switch and get off, because you have to, and some people just naturally do it. Some people have to be led to that,
Right.
to understand. But when you're developing young professionals, that's what they need to understand. As you shift into leadership, it's less about you, and your competencies change 100%. Today it was all about getting your work done. Tomorrow it's how are your people getting the work done?
Yeah.
And that takes influence, and it's a whole different skill set. So keep that in mind as you're developing your people. These are the skills they need today, but this is what they're going to need in the future.
Totally.
And get them ready for that, and share those horror stories with them because they're real.
Totally.
And they happen.
Yes.
And you don't want them to it's like being a parent, right?
It's so
I don't want you to make the same mistake I made.
Right.
So I'm going to share with you how I screwed up.
Totally.
And they might roll their eyes and be like, whatever.
It'll mean something to you later, though.
You're a dinosaur. I don't want to know what you did back in the Stone Ages.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Seriously, such value right there in what you said. I think we put a bookend on that episode of the Right People, Right Places podcast. Maeve, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And for those of you who would like to continue to learn more, we're going to have more episodes having great leaders like Maeve on. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and it's the Right People, Right Places podcast. Also, if you're looking for career opportunities and growth, look no further than MTE Corporation. They're doing great things. I know that their job board's up to date with all the latest and greatest in terms of opportunities. You can reach out to Maeve as well. She can be found on LinkedIn. Okay, so that could be a good connecting point. But in terms of careers and website, I would just go to the MTE careers page or their presence on LinkedIn in terms of their company page where a lot of their positions are posted. So lots of growth, lots of great things going on. And yeah, I think that's a wrap for this episode of the Right People, Right Places podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Raul.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.